Okay, here we are again. The Hobo Bacon group. I was gonna say, I mean, like, we're missing half of us, but we can make up for it with Clarice. It doesn't matter. Anyways, Cayman, Brad, Ciern, Justin. So we're here for part 2, numero dos, for our Spanish audience. On the Ken Ham, Bille Nye debate. So to recap their introductions, Ken Ham, and if you have not seen the debate, you should just go back and watch the debate.
Link below.
Oh my god, I can do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that too.
Heck, you could even do that or
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and you know, it's
Below.
in one of those 3 spots. You
Yeah,
can move it every
we'll
time
be
we move
able
our
to,
hands.
Yeah. So, anyways, go back and watch the debate all by itself, and then come to us because we're the experts. Ish.
Pretend.
Yeah.
Pretend
So
land.
it's pretend land. So we're the experts now. So to recap, Ken Ham has now brought up that there's a difference between historical science, looking back at the past, mostly dealing with the age of the Earth, and experimental science. You okay?
Yeah, keep talking.
Okay. Keep talking. Hate to see you go. Love watching you walk away. Okay. And then Bille Nye has come back and said, okay, so you're going to see you're going to hear a couple of stories. You're not going to. Well, I mean, you are going to see them.
This is a 2-minute long introduction.
For a 5-minute long
Yeah.
segment. Okay, we're going to get back into it. Bille Nye has said that there is science and there is science. Which I don't really get how all of a sudden this has come up as far as creation being a model for a viable model for the origins of the Earth.
Oh, that's not biased. I'm gonna start it.
No, I mean either one. Neither of them have said
Neither of them.
because the one was oh, you're gonna hear a story and science is science, and the other one was there's historical science and then there's science.
It's just because Bille Nye is a comedian-based. What he did
First
for
off, he's
so
an
many.
engineer.
Yes.
He graduated from Cornell. This
I
is
know.
in the introduction. Don't you pay
But
attention?
His again, his entire basis of communication with the crowd is all comedian based.
It works.
I know.
It's what I do.
I know. And
I'm the only one that laughs at me.
yes,
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Can I start
I
it?
wonder if that's. Is that do I have it on backward? It doesn't matter. Yeah, go ahead. So we're gonna get into the second segment. So this is actually going to be their real debates.
If they've seen the video, they know. So
Yeah. Anyways, we're gonna get back into it.
All for their case questions. Mr. Ham, you're up.
Fully illustrated.
good. I need pictures.
Well, the debate topic was, is creation a viable model of origins in today's modern scientific era? And I made this statement at the end of my opening statement. Creation is the only viable model of historical science confirmed by observational science in today's modern scientific era. And I said, what we need to be doing is actually defining our terms, and particularly 3 terms: science, creation, and evolution. Now, I discussed the meaning of the word science and what is meant by experimental or observational science briefly, and that both creationists and evolutionists can be great scientists, for instance. I mentioned Craig Venter, a biologist, he's an atheist, and he's a great scientist. He was one of the first researchers to sequence the human genome. I
Building
also
your base.
mentioned Dr. Raymond Damadian,
Solid.
who actually
But his base
invented
has nothing to
the
do with his
MRI
model.
scanner.
It's
I want you to meet.
He's
a
saying that
typical
creationists and
creationist
atheists
who
can be
is
great
a
scientists. That's not part of
scientist.
he
the
doesn't have to build as much
Hi, my name is
evidence
Dr. Raymond Damadian. I am a young Earth
if he can
creation scientist
build
who
the
believes
basis that
God
he's
created the world in
able to
6
speak
24-hour
legitimately.
days, just as
I don't have a
recorded
way
in the
of
book
words to
Genesis.
properly explain
By
this,
God's
but
grace
I mean, I guess
and the
that's
devoted
fair.
prayers of my godly mother-in-law, I invented the MRI scanner in 1969. The idea that scientists who believe the Earth is 6,000 years old cannot do real science is simply wrong.
Well, he's most adamant about that. And actually, he revolutionized medicine, and he's a biblical creationist. And I
Again,
encourage
building your
children
base.
to
That's
follow
really all
people
that's
like
going
that.
on here.
It has nothing to do
Their
with the
heroes. Let
topic.
me introduce
No.
you to another biblical creation scientist.
My name is Danny Faulkner. I received my PhD in astronomy from Indiana University. For 26 and a half years, I was professor at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster, where I hold the rank of Distinguished Professor Emeritus.
Is that in the Bible Belt?
Upon my retirement from the university in January of 2013,
Indiana?
I joined the research staff at Answers in
I
Genesis.
don't know.
I'm a stellar astronomer.
What are you?
That means my primary interest is stars, but I'm particularly interested in the study of eclipsing binary stars. And I've published many articles in the astronomy literature, places such as the Astrophysical Journal, the Astronomical Journal, and the Observatory. There is nothing in observational astronomy that contradicts a recent creation.
I also mentioned Dr. Stuart Burgess, Professor of Design, Engineering Design at Bristol University in England. Now, he designed a double-action worm gear set with the 3 hinges of the robotic arm on a very expensive satellite. And if that had not worked, if that gear set had not worked, that whole satellite would have been useless. Yet Dr. Burgess is a biblical creationist who believes just as I believe. Now, think about this for a moment. A scientist like Dr. Burgess who believe in creation just as I do, a small minority in the scientific world. But let's see what he says about scientists believing in creation.
I find that many of my colleagues in academia are sympathetic to the creationist viewpoint, including biologists. However, they are often afraid to speak out because of the criticisms they would get from the media and atheist lobby.
I agree, that's a real problem today. We need to have freedom to be able to speak on these topics. You know, I just want to say, by the way, that creation...
Is he done introducing people?
Non-Christian scientists, I should say, non-Christian scientists are really borrowing from the Christian worldview anyway to carry out their experimental observational science. Think about it. When they're doing observational science using a scientific method, they have to assume the laws of logic, they have to assume the laws of nature, they have to assume the uniformity of nature. I mean, think about it. If the universe came about by natural processes, where'd the laws of logic come from? Did they just pop into existence? Are we in a stage now where we only have half logic? So you see, I have a question for Bille Nye. How do you account for the laws of logic and the laws of nature from a naturalistic worldview that excludes the existence of God? Now, in my opening statement, I also discussed a different type of science or knowledge, origins or historical science. See, again, there's a confusion here, there's a misunderstanding here. People, by and large, have not been taught to look at what you believe about the past as different to what you're observing in the present. You don't observe the past directly. Even when you think about the creation account, I mean, we can't observe God creating. We can't observe the creation of Adam and Eve. We admit that. We're willing to admit our beliefs about the past. But see, what you see in the present is very different. Even some public school textbooks, actually, well, they sort of acknowledge the difference between historical and observational science. Here is an earth science textbook that's used in public schools, and we read this. In contrast to physical geology, the aim of historical geology is to understand Earth's long history. And then they make the statement, historical geology, so we're talking about historical science, tries to establish a timeline of the vast number of physical and biological changes that have occurred in the past. We study physical geology before historical geology because we first must understand how Earth works before we try to unravel its past. In other words, we observe things in the present and then, okay, we're assuming that that's always happened in the past and we're going to try and figure out how this happened. See, there is a difference between what you observe and what happened in the past. Let me illustrate it this way. If Bille Nye and I went to the Grand Canyon, we could agree that that's a Coconino sandstone in the Hermit Shale, and there's the boundary. They're sitting one on top of the other. We could agree on that. Do you know what we would disagree on? I mean, we could even analyze the minerals and agree on that. But we would disagree on how long it took to get there. But see, none of us saw the sandstone or the shale being laid down. There's a supposed 10 million year gap there, but I don't see a gap. But that might be different to what Bille Nye would see. But see, there's a difference between what you actually observe directly and then your interpretation in regard to the past.
I'm going to pause it right there. And I'm just going to share something that I've read his book. A lot of tidbits from his book. It's just answers from Genesis or something like that.
I'm sorry. I have to. We have a third party. Come here.
You're
Hey,
really
look
introduced
up
dog.
here. Look, come here, look. Idiot. So this is Ripley. If anybody wants to stay up with late nights with something that whines at you worse than any other living creature, call me at 555. Shell's gonna look at this video and be like, "Why are you selling my dog?" Anyways, it does. Okay, get animal. You're out. Okay, you've been cut from the program. Good. Now get. Okay.
That dog's mind.
Where to go? Yeah. He drew the short straw in the genetic gene pool. Genetic gene pool. Yeah, I'm coining that phrase. Okay, so you were gonna say something like legitimate before
Partially, that was good.
him.
This point that he's trying to make, I read it more in depth.
Oh, good, because you're gonna have to explain this to
I know.
me. I was gonna wait till the end, but this works.
Theoretically, like, the point he's getting at, he's going to be bringing up quite a bit, is the fact that this is how things are now. You know,
Yeah.
you can observe it, and he made a very good point. Yes, we have to observe the now to understand the past. You know, in the same sense that you have to observe the now to be able to predict the future. In the same, in that sense, it's like,
Okay, I'm following.
push over this rock, it falls. Every rock that I push over is going to fall. So in the past, I can assume that all rocks that were pushed fall. The point that he's going to make is the fact that because we can't observe it, we can't always say with 100% certainty that happened, just because we can't observe it. So therefore, we can inject our own.
So what he's saying is that if I ran around and pushed over a whole bunch of rocks and then ran away, and then you came around and saw all of these rocks,
Since I can't observe it,
since you didn't see me push over all the rocks,
but let me, and I'm going to take the role of Ken Ham, but let me interject my theory that when
it's not his theory,
Yeah.
it's not your theory, it is the creationist view of the world origin.
is the creation as a Jedi Kozer,
Okay. I'll give it
all
to you.
these rocks were force pushed at once, or and were force lifted and gently set down. But since neither you or I, as someone that did not push the rocks down, could not have observed the situation, my theory, in my eyes, holds as much weight as yours.
So the fact that there was nobody to witness it, but yet nobody that we know of can force push all of the rocks at once.
What proof do you have that?
Do you know anybody that can force push rocks?
No, but do you know anyone that can prove that things That's-
Wait, which thing?
I know.
Really broad.
pushing?
I do know some of those people.
But you see my point.
I mean, kind of in like a really abstract sense.
Welcome to religion.
Oh god, you can't see it, but my eyes got really big. Okay, back to Mr.
When
Ham.
I was at the Goddard Space Center a number of years ago, I met creationists and evolutionists who were both working on the Hubble telescope. They agreed on how to build a Hubble telescope.
Oh, and the
You know
fact
what
that
they
he's bringing all these
disagreed on?
people in is like,
Well,
hey, look,
they
smart
disagreed on how to
person.
interpret the
He
data
says
that telescope
things that I
obtained
agree with.
regard to the age of the universe.
Let's go to
And,
Hitler
you know,
now.
We could go on and talk about lots of
I'm sorry,
other.
what?
Let's go to Hitler now, because Hitler said, oh yeah, creationism. You know, that's just kind of the point he's making. And it's like, smart people, they must be right, kind of a deal.
Well, but it's not, because we're talking about...
But if you're then going to use radioactive elements and talk about the age of the Earth, you've got a problem. 'Cause
And
you
the
weren't
issue is
there.
that right
You've got to
now-
understand parent elements, daughter elements, and so on. We could agree whether you're a creationist or evolutionist on the technology to put the rover on Mars, but we're going to disagree on how to interpret the origin of Mars. I mean, there are some people that believe there was even a global flood on Mars and there's no liquid water on Mars. But You know, we're going to disagree maybe on our interpretation of origins, and you can't prove either way because, not from an observational science perspective, because we've only got the present. Creationists and evolutionists both work on medicines and vaccines. You see, it doesn't matter whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, all scientists have the same experimental or observational science. So I have a question for Bill Nye. Can you name one piece of technology that could only have been developed starting with a belief in molecules to man evolution? Now, here's another important fact. Creationists and evolutionists
Okay, hold
all
on.
have the same
That
evidence.
question is completely fallacious because all the observable time that things that we can inventions are within the present observable time frame that he's talking about. So that question is completely cut out. Just saying.
And no, I 100% agree with you.
Okay. Good.
You're not going to hear argument from me.
That question doesn't count.
So from the Christian, that question's wrong.
I'm not a Christian.
From the used to be Christian, the question's wrong. From the guy who believes way more in God than somebody else, the question's wrong.
Oh my gosh,
It's a wrong question.
whose is that?
We're going to talk about that later.
Just please tell me.
Shayna's.
Okay.
I wouldn't. What? Who else would it? Does it matter?
A little bit.
I'm not explaining the story. Continue.
Why do you have a picture of a moon on your computer?
Why wouldn't you? You should need to press play.
I should also clarify that I don't necessarily believe in creationism, nor the English language. But
It's really hard to talk and cast. It really, I mean, I guess we're not really casting, but it's really hard to talk on camera.
I am pretty adamant in the belief of a supernatural.
Which is fine.
Yeah, which I think we share that.
We do. I think in a different way. But
Yeah, but it's more of the acknowledgement of that there could be a
mine's not
existence
that at all.
of.
Bill Nye and I have the same Grand Canyon. We don't disagree on that.
We do have.
We would
there
have the
is a
same
Grand
fish
Canyon.
fossil. This is one from the Creation Museum. The same dinosaur skeletons, the same animals, the same humans,
my
the same
things are
DNA,
going on the right
the
track.
same radioactive decay elements that we see. We have the same universe. Actually, we all have the same evidences.
Yes.
It's
and
not
he
the
makes that.
evidences that are
No,
different.
he makes that. This is a good
It's a
point.
battle over the same evidence in regard to
I
how
love
we
that
interpret
caricature
the
that they made
past.
of
You know why that is? Because it's
I'd
really a
like to-
battle over
very
worldviews
well
and
done.
starting points. It's a battle over philosophical worldviews and starting points, but the same evidence. Now, I admit my starting point is that God is the ultimate authority. But if someone doesn't accept that, then man has to be the ultimate authority. And that's really the difference when it comes down to it. You see, I've been emphasizing
I
the
love
difference between
Bill's,
historical
like,
origin
bastard.
science, knowledge
It's-
about the past when we weren't there, and we need to understand that we weren't there. Or experimental or observational science, using your five senses in the present, the scientific method, what you can directly observe, test, repeat. There's a big difference between those two. And that's not what's being taught in our public schools, and that's why kids aren't being taught to think critically
looking at the other
and
things.
correctly
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah.
origins issue. But you know, it's also important to understand when talking about creation evolution, both involve
labeling, back
historical
off.
science and observational science. You see, the role of observational science is this: it can be used to confirm or otherwise one's historical science based on one's starting point. Now, when you think about the debate topic and what I affirmed concerning creation, if our origins or historical science based on the Bible's account of origins is true, then there should be predictions from this that we can test using observational science, and there are. For instance, based on the Bible, we'd expect to find evidence confirming an intelligence produced life. We'd expect to find evidence confirming after their kind. The Bible says God made kinds of animals and plants after their kind, implying each kind produces its own, not that one kind changes into another. You'd expect to find evidence confirming a global flood of Noah's day, evidence confirming one race of humans, because we all go back to Adam and Eve. Biologically, that would mean there's one race. Evidence confirming the Tower of Babel, that God gave different languages. Evidence confirming a young universe. Now, I can't go through all of those, but
Okay.
a couple
All
of
right.
them
Challenge
we'll look at
accepted.
briefly.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh wait, can I go back like literally a second?
I guess.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. Okay, I'm going to try and go through these from memory.
Okay,
Specifically, again, it's easy to refute a lot of these things that the Bible was written within how many years ago? Or
5,000.
5,000. How much of the evidence that was there for all those things were at those present times? Did you get what I'm saying?
No, I mean, I can't. All of those make sense, except for the whole Adam and Eve thing.
Okay.
I
was gonna say,
inherently crap.
Well, again, the Adam and Eve thing is really easy to explain away when you have a God that can create a universe.
No. See, okay, here's my issue. So he says, let's go on the Adam and Eve point.
Okay.
That they're one race of humans. Yes, there is one species of human.
Mm-hmm.
There's human. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if all of us came from Adam and Eve, we all need to be black or white or yellow or brown or something. Because how in the world do you get all of these morphological variations from two individuals?
The explanation for Adam and Eve, the Christianity view, again, one that I've known in the past, because I'm assuming he doesn't discuss this.
That's a good question. I can't. It's been like a week since this thing's been out.
We'll eventually run into it. But my prediction is that he uses the, from what I've read from his stuff, very shortly, is that everything was in Adam and Eve. God, because he's an intelligent creator, put
that makes
all
him a
the
pervert.
I know, put all the future races or future whatever you want to call it, future human life, enough encoding, if you will. Adam and Eve were a big gigantic zip folder.
Did you really just make... I mean, that's a good analogy, but you really just went back
it's
to
the
that.
perfect analogy. And as soon as they start having kids...
So why can't I then, if I have intimate relations... Honey, don't read into this.
Just don't even continue.
With a white girl, why can't we produce a black baby?
Because they're all essentially used up at that point. Think of it this way: it's every time that
Wait, what?
I know. Hold on.
Like the genetics it has a time lapse on it. Like
Not a time
sorry,
lapse.
you're done.
It cut off. I don't know exactly. Imagine at that point, essentially, every time you pulled a folder from the zip file, it couldn't be accessed at any certain other point. It's a really bad...
biologically impossible.
No, exactly. That's the point. It's just
So
that
Adam and Eve are biologically impossible to be our only two ancestors.
biologically using science. But when you put a supernatural spin
Did
on
God
it...
create more after Adam and Eve?
No.
Okay.
They contained all... Again, from the theory, they contained all the genetics within themselves for enough to create blacks, whites, Asians, colors of the rainbow.
I don't see purple people.
So
That would be cool.
that's just the...
But it's biologically not even
Again, Adam and Eve.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm saying that modern biology explains, biology,
Yes, exactly.
not historical biology.
So, there's that. Tower of Babel, it's easy to create a story. I can say 50,000 years ago that there was a rock, and whenever this rock was touched, someone walked away from it with a new language.
Is that really the story of Babel?
No, it's not.
Oh, I was gonna
Do
say.
you know the story of Babel?
No.
A king, it's real quick, a king built a big tower to try and reach the heavens to mock God, but
I really wish I had a camera
I know.
to show. Anyways, go ahead.
And to mock God, and when he reached the top, he noticed that he couldn't reach God, so he was like, bring me a bow, and he brought a bow so he took the bow, shot up into the air, and God was pissed off at this because it's Old Testament God, not New Testament God, so he
Was kind of schizophrenic.
Yeah, so he didn't kill all of them, but everyone at that point spoke a different language, and since they couldn't communicate, because there's no pointing at a rock and saying lift, and since they couldn't communicate, they all dispersed to the different nations. That's where different languages came from.
So that is the explanation. The more I learn,
Interesting, isn't it?
So that is the explanation over they originated in different areas and just
Even then,
a language evolved
Yeah, no.
individually.
Tower of Babel is probably one of the weakest points that you can bring up.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we were understanding that correctly.
After their kind, evidence confirming that. In the Creation Museum,
So he's
we
defined
have
species.
a
That's
display featuring replicas, actually, of Darwin's finches. They're called Darwin's finches.
Cut to our
Darwin
next
collected
discussion.
finches from the Galapagos and took them back to England, and we see the different species, the different beak sizes here. And from the specimens that Darwin obtained in the Galapagos, he actually pondered these things and how do you explain this? And in his notes, actually, he came up with this diagram here, a tree. And he actually said, I think. So he was talking about different species and maybe those species came from some common ancestor. Actually, when it comes to finches, we actually would agree as creationists that different finch species came from a common ancestor, but a finch is what they would have to come
Why
from.
couldn't they come from a sparrow?
See, Darwin wasn't just thinking about species. Darwin had a much bigger picture in mind. When you look at The Origin of Species and read that book, you'll find he made this statement. From such low and intermediate form, both animals and plants may have been developed, and if we admit this, we must likewise admit that all organic beings which have ever lived on this earth may be descended from some one primordial form. So he had in mind what we today know as an evolutionary tree of life, that all life has arisen from some primordial form. Now, when you consider the classification system, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, we would say as creationists, and we have many creation scientists who've researched this, and for lots of reasons I would say the kind in Genesis 1 really is more at the family level of classification. For instance, there's one dog kind, there's one cat kind, even though you have different genera, different species. That would mean, by the way, you didn't need anywhere near the number of animals on the ark as people think. You wouldn't need all the species of dogs, just two, not all the species of cats, just two. And you see, based on the biblical account there in Genesis 1, creationists have drawn up what they believe is a creation orchard. In other words, they're saying, look, there's great variation in the genetics of dogs and finches and so on. And so over time, particularly after Noah's flood, you'd expect if there were two dogs, for instance, you could end up with different species of dogs because there's an incredible amount of variability in the genes of any creature. And so you'd expect these different species up here, but there's limits. Dogs will always be dogs, finches will always be finches. Now, as a creationist, I maintain that observational science actually confirms this model based on the Bible. For instance, take dogs. Okay, in a scientific paper dated January 2014, that's this year, scientists working at the University of California stated this.
Another thing.
We provide several lines of evidence supporting a single origin for dogs and disfavoring alternative models in which dog lineages arise separately from geographically distinct wolf populations. And they put this diagram in the paper. By the way, that diagram is very, very similar to this diagram that creationists proposed based upon the creation account in Genesis. In other words, you have a common dog ancestor that gives rise to the different species of dogs, and that's exactly what we're saying here.
Okay.
Now, in the Creation
Do I need
Museum...
to explain the orchard tree?
No, I just don't get, so if there's one kind, why are there so many branches before the flood?
Because it's the same thing. It started over. You had one kind of dog, and through the variations that he's acknowledging that can happen, you can have different
Except for the fox.
Well, okay, you can have different these two dogs, and they can make big dogs, small dogs, variations of dogs like we have today from two dogs. You can...
Except that the entirety of all of the domestic dogs are one species.
Exactly. So, what I'm just trying to explain him. I'm not trying to...
It's fine. We really shouldn't keep stopping this and keep going into it. Let's wait till the end. Dog. We're coming back to dogs. Remember this. We're coming back to dogs.
You moved your
We
mouse
actually
too
show
much
the
on the
finches
YouTube
here.
video.
You see the finches with their different beaks beside dog skulls, different species of dogs. By the way, there's more variation in the dog skulls here than there are in these finches. Yet the dogs, well, that's never used as an example of evolution, but the finches are, particularly in the public school textbooks. Students are taught, see the changes that are occurring
Darwin's a
here?
superstar.
And here's another problem that we've got. Not only has the word science been hijacked by secularists, I believe the word evolution has been hijacked
There was
by
literally, we
secularists.
went to the
The word
library and they
evolution has
dressed up
been
in
hijacked
puffy
using
shirts
what I
and
call a
yarn.
bait and switch.
There's
Let me explain to
yarn.
you. The word
You can't
evolution
science.
is being used in public school textbooks, and we often see it in documentaries and so on. It's used for observable changes that we would agree with, and then used for unobservable changes, such as molecules to man. Let me explain to you what's really going on, because I was a science teacher in the public schools, and I know what the students were taught, and I check public school textbooks anyway to know what they're taught. See, students are taught today, look, there's all these different animals, plants, but they're all part of this great big tree of life that goes back to some primordial form. And look, we see changes in finches, changes in dogs, and so on. Now, we don't deny the changes, you see that. You see different species of finches, different species of dogs, but then they put it all together in this evolutionary tree, but that's what you don't observe. You don't observe that. That's belief there. That's their historical science. I would say was wrong. But you know what you do observe? You do observe different species of dogs, different species of finches, but then there are limits, and you don't see one kind changing into another. Actually, we're told that if you teach creation in the public schools, that's teaching religion. If you teach evolution, that's science. And I'm going to say, wait a minute. Actually, the creation model here, based upon the Bible, observational science confirms this. This is what you observe. You don't observe this tree. Actually, it's the public school textbooks that are teaching a belief, imposing it on students, and they need to be teaching them observational science to understand the reality of what's happening. Now, what we found is that public school textbooks present the evolutionary tree as science, but reject the creation orchard as religion. But observational science confirms the creation orchard. So public school textbooks are rejecting observational science and imposing a naturalistic religion on students. The word evolution has been hijacked using a bait and switch to indoctrinate students to accept evolutionary belief as observational science. Let me introduce you to another scientist, Richard Lenski, of Michigan State University. He's a great scientist. He's known for culturing E. coli in the lab.
Used.
Really
He
popular
found
right now.
there are some E. coli that actually seem to develop the ability to grow on substrate, on citrate in substrate. But Richard Lenski is here mentioned in this book, and it's called Evolution in the Lab. So the ability to grow on citrate is said to be evolution. And there are those that say, hey, this is against the creationists. For instance, Jerry Coyne from the University of Chicago says, Lenski's experiment is also yet another poke in the eye for anti-evolutionists. He says the thing I like most is that it says you can get these complex traits evolving by a combination of unlikely events. But is it a poke in the eye for anti-evolutionists? Is it really seeing complex traits evolving? What does it mean that some of these bacteria are able to grow on citrate? Let me introduce you to another biblical creationist who is a scientist.
Hi, my name is Dr. Andrew Fabich. I got my PhD from the University of Oklahoma in microbiology. I teach at Liberty University, and I do research on E. coli in the intestine. I've published in secular journals from the American Society for Microbiology, including infection immunity and applied environmental microbiology, as well as several others. My work has been cited even in the past year in the journals Nature, Science Translational Medicine, Public Library of Science, Public Library of Science Genetics. It's cited regularly in those journals. And while I was taught nothing but evolution, I don't accept that position, and I do my research from a creation perspective. When I look at the evidence that people cite of E. coli supposedly evolving over 30 years, over 30,000 generations in the lab, and people say that it is now able to grow on citrate, I don't deny that it grows on citrate, but it's not any kind of new information. The information's already there, and it's just a switch that gets turned on and off, and that's what they reported in there. There's nothing new.
See, students need to be told what's really going on here. Certainly there's change, but it's not change necessary from molecules to man. Now, we could look at other predictions. What about evidence confirming one race? Well, when we look at the human population, we see lots of differences. But based on Darwin's ideas of human evolution as presented in The Descent of Man, I mean, Darwin did teach in The Descent of Man there are lower races and higher races. Would you believe that back in the 1900s, one of the most popular biology textbooks used in the public schools in America taught this? At the present time, there exist upon Earth 5 races, or varieties of man, and finally the highest type of all, the Caucasians, represented by the civilized white inhabitants of Europe and America. Can you imagine if that was in the public schools today? And yet, that's what was taught, but it was based on Darwin's ideas that are wrong. You have a wrong foundation, you're going to have a wrong worldview. Now, had they started from the Bible and from the creation account in the Bible, what does it teach? Well, we're all descendants of Adam and Eve. We go through the Tower of Babel, different languages, so different people groups formed, distinct characteristics, but we'd say, you know what, that means there's biologically only one race of humans. Well, I mentioned Dr. Venter before, and he was a researcher with the Human Genome Project, and you'll remember in the year 2000, this was headline news, and what we read was this: they had put together a draft of the entire sequence of the human genome and unanimously declared there is only one race, the human race. Wow, who would have guessed? But you see, there we have observational science confirming the creation account, not confirming at all Darwin's ideas. Now, there's much more that could be said on each of these topics. Obviously, you can't do that in a short time like this, and you could do a lot more research. I suggest you visit our website at Answers in Genesis for a lot more information. So, the debate topic
that he brings up
is the creation of a viable model of origins in today's scientific era.
I just don't have time.
I said we need to define the terms, and particularly the term science, the term religion, and I believe we need to understand how they're being used to impose an anti-God religion on generations of unsuspecting students. You see, I keep emphasising we do need to understand the difference between experimental or observational science and historical science. You know what? The secularists don't like me doing this because they don't want to admit that there's a belief aspect to what they're saying, and there is, and they can't get away from it. Let me illustrate this with a statement from Bille Nye.
You can show the Earth is not flat. You can show the Earth is not 10,000 years old.
By the way, I agree. You can show the Earth is not flat. There's a video from the Galileo spacecraft showing the Earth speeded up, of course, but spinning. You see it's a sphere. You can observe that. You can't observe the age of the Earth. You don't see that. You see, again, I emphasize there's a big difference between historical science, talking about the past, and observational science, talking about the present. And I believe what's happening is this, that students are being indoctrinated by the confusion of terms. The hijacking of the word science and the hijacking of the word evolution in a bait and switch. Let me illustrate further with this video clip. Because here I assert that Bille Nye is equating observational science with historical science. And I also say it's not a mystery when you understand the difference.
Apparently, people with these deeply held religious beliefs, they embrace that whole literal interpretation of the Bible as written in English as a worldview. And at the same time, they accept aspirin, antibiotic drugs, airplanes, but they're able to hold these two worldviews. And this is a mystery.
Actually, I suggest to you it's not a mystery. You see, when I'm talking about antibiotics, aspirin, smoke detectors, jet planes, that's Ken Ham, the observational science bloke. I'm an Australian. We call guys blokes, okay? But when you're talking about creation in thousands of years or the age of the Earth, that's Ken Ham, the historical science bloke. I'm willing to admit that. Now, when Bille Nye's talking about aspirin, antibiotics, jet planes, smoke detectors, he does a great job at that. I used to enjoy watching him on TV too. That's Bille Nye, the observational science guy. But when he's talking about evolution of millions of years, I'm challenging him that that's Bille Nye, the historical science guy. And I challenge the evolutionists to admit the belief aspects of their particular worldview. Now, at the Creation Museum, we're only too willing to admit our beliefs based upon the Bible, but we also teach people the difference between beliefs and what one can actually observe and experiment with in the present. I believe we're teaching people to think critically and to think in the right terms about science. I believe it's the creationists that should be educating the kids out there, because we're teaching them the right way to think. You know, we admit our origins of historical science is based upon the Bible, but I'm just challenging evolutionists to admit the belief aspects of evolution and be upfront about the difference here. As I said, I'm only too willing to admit my historical science based on the Bible.
Take a photo
And
if you can give it
let
an
me
image.
further go on and define the
It's
term
gonna happen.
creation
That's what would
as
happen.
we use it.
Wait, what?
By creation, we mean, here at Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum, we mean the account based on the Bible. Yes, I take Genesis as literal history, as Jesus did. And here at the Creation Museum, we walk people through that history. We walk them through creation, a perfect creation. God made Adam and Eve, land animal kind, sea creatures, and so on. And then sin and death entered the world, so there was no death before sin. That means, how can you have billions of dead things before man sinned? And then the catastrophe of Noah's flood. If there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. I had to say that because a lot of our supporters would want me to. And what do you find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Confusion, the Tower of Babel. God gave different languages, so you get different people groups. So this is the geological, astronomical, anthropological, biological history as recorded in the Bible. So this is concerning what happened in the past that explains the present. And then, of course, that God's Son stepped into history to be Jesus Christ, the God-man, to die on the cross, be raised from the dead, and one day there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth to come. And, you know, not only is this an understanding of history to explain the geology, biology, astronomy, and so on, to connect the present to the past, but it's also a foundation for our whole worldview. For instance, in Matthew 19, when Jesus was asked about marriage, he said, "Have you not read? He which made the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they'll be one flesh." He quoted from Genesis as literal history, Genesis 1 and 2. God invented marriage, by the way. That's where marriage comes from, and it's to be a man and a woman. And not only marriage, ultimately, every single biblical doctrine of theology, directly or indirectly, is founded in Genesis. Why is there sin in the world?
He's using
Genesis.
the Bible.
Why is there
The
death?
Bible.
Genesis. Why do we wear clothes?
Yeah.
Genesis. Why did Jesus die on a cross? Genesis. It's a very important book. It's foundational to all Christian doctrine. And you see, when we look at that, what I call the 7 C's of history that we walk people through here at the museum, think about how it all connects together. A perfect creation, it'll be perfect again in the future. Sin and death entered the world. That's why God's Son died on the cross, and to conquer death and offer a free gift of salvation. The flood of Noah's day, a reminder that the flood was a judgment because of man's wickedness, but at the same time a message of God's grace and salvation, as Noah and his family had to go through a door to be saved. So we need to go through a door to be saved. Jesus Christ said, "I am the door. By me if any man enter in, he'll be saved."
I wish I could come up
and we
with
make no apology
diagrams
about
like
the
that.
fact that what we're on about
I mean,
is
not on the
this.
subject
If you
matter,
confess
but
with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your
Where I
heart
said
God has
7
raised him from the
C's,
dead,
it makes
you'll
sense.
be saved. Now, as soon as I say that, see,
All the
people
crap
say,
that I say
see,
is like
if
the
you allow
SAB
creation in schools, for instance, if you allow
75.
students to even hear about it, this is
DFW.
religion. You know, let me illustrate this, talking about a recent battle in Texas over textbooks in the public school. A newspaper report said this: textbook and classroom curriculum battles have long ranged in Texas, pitting creationists, those who see God's hand in the creation of the universe, against academics. Stop right there. Notice, creationists, academics. Creationists can't be academics. Creationists can't be scientists. See, it's the way things are worded out there. It's an indoctrination that's going on. We worry about religious and
I still don't
political
understand
ideology
what
trumping
that
scientific facts.
is
Wait a
as
minute,
a
what do I mean by
point
science?
at
You're talking
how
about
a
what you
creation
observe,
model
or you're talking about your
is
beliefs about
viable.
the past? Now, Kathy Miller is the president of the Texas Freedom Network, and she's vocally spoken out. She's spoken out about this textbook battle there in Texas. And the mission statement of the organisation she's president of says, "The Texas Freedom Network advances a mainstream agenda of religious freedom and individual liberties to counter the religious right." Religious freedom, individual liberties.
Well, he's an engineer.
And then she makes this statement: science education, what does she mean by science, should be based on mainstream science education, not on personal ideological beliefs of unqualified reviewers. Wait a minute, they want religious liberty and not personal ideological beliefs? I assert this. Public school textbooks are using the same word science for observational and historical science. They arbitrarily define science as naturalism and outlaw the supernatural. They present molecules to man evolution as fact, and they're imposing the religion of naturalism on generations of students. They're imposing their ideology on the students, that everything's explained by natural processes. That is a religion. What does she mean by religious
Everything
liberty? They tolerate their religion. See, the battle is really about authority. It's more than just science or evolution or creation. It's about who is the
And
authority.
if evolution
in this
is
world,
wrong,
man or God.
creation must be
You start
right.
with naturalism.
That's what a
then
lot of
What about morals? Who decides right and
this
wrong?
stuff
Well, it's
is.
subjective. Marriage, well, whatever you want it to be. Get rid of...
Wow, interesting.
Well, my computer was like, huh, just kidding. All right, let's try that again.
Old people, I mean, why not? I mean, they're just animals. They're costing us a lot of money. Abortion, get rid of spare cats, get rid of spare kids. We're all animals. But if you start from God's word, moral absolutes. God decides right and wrong. Marriage, one man and one woman. Sanctity of life. We care for old people. They're made in the image of God. Life begins at fertilization, so abortion is killing a human being. We do see the collapse of Christian morality in our culture and increasing moral relativism because generations of kids are being taught the religion of naturalism and that the Bible can't be trusted. And so again I say, creation is the only viable model of historical science confirmed by observational science in today's modern scientific era. You know what, I'm a science teacher. I want to see kids taught science. I love science. I want to see more Dr. Demadians in the world. You know, if we teach them the whole universe is a result of natural processes and not designed by a creator God, they might be looking in the wrong places or have the wrong idea when they're looking at the creation in regard to how you develop technology, because if they look on it as just random processes, that could totally influence the way they think. If they understand it was a perfect world marred by sin, that could have a great effect on how they then look for overcoming diseases and problems in the world. I want children to be taught the right foundation, that there's a God who created them, who loves them, who died on the cross for them, and that they're special. They're made in the image of God.
Mommy always told me I was
Mr.
special.
Ham. We can applaud Mr. Ham.
Okay.
See
But
that
it's taped, so you should pause it. So we can discuss all of that.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to dogs.
Okay. Do you want me to explain the orchard? Or do you want to
Well,
discuss
no,
the
'cause
orchard first?
Because I get it.
Okay.
Because the orchard and the molecules to man model are the same after you get to a certain point. Once you go far enough back,
Well, okay.
if you start going far enough back, okay, so yes, dogs have a similar ancestor to cats. Dogs, cats, and bears all share a similar ancestor that shares a similar ancestor with another group of mammals.
In the tree. That not in the orchard. That's only in the tree.
No.
No, in the
In
orchard.
the orchard, he said all dogs came from the same dog.
Exactly.
Okay.
But dogs and cats didn't come from the same axe. In the orchard.
diagram he had, it said so. It said elephants came from the same kind.
No,
Maybe he
that-
just meant that elephants.
No, that
are
was
family.
kinds.
Oh, okay, that makes
That
more
had
sense.
nothing to do. No,
Because it was like family kinds, and then it went
Yeah,
on
no,
to
that
those.
had
I was
nothing
like,
to do with
how
that
does it
other
go
stuff.
Into the genuses.
no. That's again. He doesn't agree with the genus and
Well, because
his
the
stuff.
orchard, if you take like the branches of the trees of the tree, the orchard and the tree agree with the last.
You can take
10,000 years.
Essentially, what you can do is you can take a branch off the tree, yeah, like you're saying, and then just put it up there, and then you got your orchard.
So they agree on it. Like the issue here is not evolution itself.
At that point, yes, it was.
Because the evolution strictly says that it has changed over time. So Ken Ham has said that from one kind of dog, other kinds of dogs have developed.
Correct.
Okay, so
And also remember, the kind that when he says kind, it means something different than when me and you say kind with a scientific background.
He means dog.
Yeah, just a kind of dog.
dog.
Chihuahua.
Two Chihuahuas were there, and they bred the rest of the. Yeah, so whatever. The original, the OG dog, the OG dogs made the rest of them. Okay. So he agrees with evolution already.
Yes,
the issue
but he
that-
doesn't call it evolution. It's just
Yeah,
that.
the issue that is really the heart of this is the starting point.
Yes.
So, okay, that's fair.
He's just.
But, like, he keeps saying that the tree's wrong. Like, okay, so, but the tree and the orchard are the same after you get past a certain point.
Exactly.
So, to take and say kinds, okay, so I'm going to say a kind of mammal instead of phylum, instead of family, I'm going up to.
It's like you can't use those words in his argument.
Well, but he said he analogied. He made the analogy of like kind equals family. In the modern.
He's like, he was like our kind is more like family kind of.
So if I just say class is kind. Okay, so I broadened the orchard, which is just taking another step back on the tree. Like, so I feel like. So he agrees in the process of evolution. He does.
He agrees with the sense that you can have these two dogs from a certain point can make these different kinds of dogs. So I can have these 2,000-year-old dogs, and they, in the process of breeding, can create chihuahuas or, timberwolves or huskies, and in the sense like
For the
that.
record, Chihuahua and Husky, same species, different subspecies. Anyways.
On the other side of the tree, or the other side of the line.
So, okay. But at the base, Ken Ham has acknowledged that he agrees with evolution.
Yes.
He agrees with evolution, the process. He doesn't agree with evolution, the origin.
Correct.
Okay, so...
But he won't call it evolution, it's something else.
It's magic.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's where I'm falling short on this, is now he's saying, I agree with evolution, but I disagree with evolution.
You're going to lose all your credibility if you just insult.
But I mean, if that's what he's saying, like, I don't understand that part.
I mean, it's not hard to understand the sense that I have a dog that's shorter than the other, so when I breed it with another short dog, I'm going to get a short dog. That's observable science.
So he's agreed with evolution.
He's agreed with the sense that, yes, I can have
because
a
evolution
dog.
does not explain an origin. Evolution explains a process of change.
Exactly. But when he sees evolution, he means but he doesn't agree with it, like you said, as a process. So it's not like he's looking at it and says, magic. He's actually looking at it and saying, I can take this and fit it with my ideals.
Okay. So the process of evolution is not the issue.
Correct. No.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay. So we both have kind of come to that conclusion. Now, what was he had one? And I wish I could go back and because I did the tree one. All right, can you think of anything else to bring up?
Besides the fact that he's using very.
I like how you pulled out he's using the Bible to support the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's one thing that's and it's tough to say from a non-religious point of view. It's like, well, it's a Bible. It's all one big book. You can't use this to support this. Well, that's not necessarily true. The
Isn't
Old
it like
Testament,
35 books or
something.
something.
It's a bunch of books together that are from different parts, and the Old Testament. It's like saying we had this great book from back in the day. It's called the Old Testament. Well, now we have this New Testament from more recent stuff, and we've bundled them together for your enjoyment, kind of a deal. It's like
how did after the Tower of
Babel.
Wow, the Tower of Abel.
Chapter 2.
Yes, welcome to Cain. The Tower of Babel. So, how did it all stay the same if none of them could speak the same language? How did...
I guess I gave a bad example. Not everyone spoke a different language themselves. So it's not like if there was 1,000 people that were there, 1,000 different languages were created.
Yeah, but
if there was thousands...
6 languages got created.
Yeah.
Okay, so
exactly.
that's fair. But now in those 6 sects, wouldn't there be a difference in translations every time? Wouldn't there now be 6 different interpretations of said events that occurred after that?
Not necessarily.
In the Bible? Because if none of them can
but
connect...
They came back 5 days later once they,
They came back 5 days later and it was magic.
I'm kidding. I'm making a joke.
Oh, God. You can't do that to me. I thought you were being serious. Wait a second. I'm so confused.
No.
Rip out my hair. I don't get it.
I see what you're getting at. There should have been... But that's easily explainable is people can look back and say, hey, this is the story that we have.
The events were the same, even though the language would be different.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so it's not,
so
but
that's fair. I can
say, and if it's in the Old Testament, that was already written by the time that we've had.
Is the Tower of Babel like the end of the New Testament?
Shows
you, I don't know
no,
jack shit.
I don't 100% sure. I'm not exactly.
Okay. So I mean, I think that he's a very well spoken man. I really do. I disagree with him. Although now we figured out that evolution as a process is okay. Right? Like
yes. No,
okay,
and
so
that's
evolution, the process we're good on.
Speaking from a scientific, when we say evolution, we're referring to the point that we can have two things make different kinds, his word, of things.
I think kinds was trademarked by,
So anyways.
the English language. I don't think it was his
version of kinds. See, you're going to find so many times in this argument that two people are going to use the same word and it's going to mean different things and it's going to be really hard to follow along.
Language.
Period.
Language. And this is why I dealt with math.
Universal language of love.
Well, that's music, but math,
is in music.
Okay, so that's section 2. I don't know. We'll see where it goes from here. I'm biased. I'm super interested to remember all of Bill's points. But all right, so we're gonna go from here, and so that's the end of section 2. We will be quickly moving into section 3, or trois. What's it in French? I did something with.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Anyways, so that's it for us for now. Later days.